Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing Live, show number 485. I'm your host, Long Gray. Sorry for the angle. I have had an iMac 27 Intel chip since 2017, and that has always been my desktop computer of happiness and joy. And finally got past the point where it wasn't having problems because it was an Intel chip and Apple doesn't support it. Anyway, I ended up finally trading it for recycling. So I am changing configurations. Right now you're on a laptop camera that's propped up with a box in front of it. It's a temporary circumstance of where the camera angle is at. I understand from cameraing that you do not want to lower to up video because it just isn't flattering, and I'm beginning to see that in a very vivid way. So besides from that, I hope everyone's doing well. We're into the holiday season full tilt. We are a week away from Thanksgiving in the US, and the weather just snapped in the north. Probably going to stay around in that sense. So we're going to get that whole winter change in cycle for holiday demand. They're already forecasting it to be the busiest travel holiday on record. So if anybody's worried about travel demand, apparently this holiday is not it. We've had that discussion. We've had the either or discussion of the K economy, and people that had the money are still going to use it. People that don't have the money are faced with an either or option, or they just go to debt. Apparently, given the circumstances of everything that's going on, political climate's changing and so forth in the US, it's a decision that they're going to enjoy the holidays with families, which goes back to earlier discussions of us as to the types of vacations families in the US tend to take. They take usually 2 on average. Remember, this is general numbers aggregated together with a lot of stuff. One larger, one smaller. The smaller is the holiday one, or the destination-based family one, shorter windows, so forth, of stay. And we're in that cycle right now. So with all of that, I had promised 3 weeks back in show 482 that we were going to get into a conversation that we pushed forward. And that was our annual discussion as to modeling. We're putting out a few extra twists to it because the world has changed a lot in a year since we went over and did the last show similar to this in the sense of content. And it's changed every year since then. We're in a wonderful world now of data access. More data access. And more importantly, it's not just about seeing it but not knowing what to do with it. We actually now have functional tools that can begin to handle some large amounts of data. We're talking about AI, of course. Good or bad, and there's lots of both. The usage of AI for data reviewing and or organization and so forth to eventually get to that holy grail of prescriptive analytics is a real thing. So our topic today, including the modeling, is simulations, modeling, and stress tests, preparation before the need. I'll bring this up as an example to this. It's Black Friday. Black Friday starts 6 months ago. Everybody has their early edition of it, and it was talked about in the news and so forth. The single day camping out in front of a store to get the one and only day deals is a passé comment. Some stores may try to trigger for nostalgic sake, but the actual method of that sales is being a technique. Long since gone. Black Friday is just a synonym for discounted deals that are high discounted deals based on the value proposition that they represent. It isn't your typical any day, any weekend offer stuff. These are supposed to be highly unique, especially available only now. Deep discounts is once in an opportunity, chance to convert you into a purchase acquisition. And everybody leans into that. Right now, we are the Black Friday week deals, the week up to Black Friday. Now, there is supposed to be a transition of other deals to be offered come Black Friday. And then also you have Cyber Monday. All this just a blur of options. We've had Prime Day deals and Target deals and Kmart deals. These are all retail things I'm referring to. Kmart, not so much anymore, but they were actually. JCPenney also had theirs and so forth, but Walmart. All of them have had their windows of opportunity to try to highlight and contrast to each other. We as an industry in hospitality are no different. And we bank on that when it comes to our budgeting and marketing strategies that we do for our annual budgets. Some of us do not get the benefit of wintertime business because of the slowdown of what people travel to our destination for. Others get a buildup of holiday business because of the destination that they represent. So each is seeing, and that goes for any business cycle, each is seeing their own cycle of what they're either people are leaving their area or people are coming to the area. With that, we basically, when we do budgets, which by now should all be done for everyone, put to bed last month in October, we probably started, as we always say, where you first analyze your past year data, your actuals, as they compared to what you thought they were going to happen, and see the variances of what your budget was versus your actuals, and where you may have went astray or what changed variations and so forth to this. We've talked a lot about variation creations and what have you, weather being an inclement one, tragedies, political climate, economic changes, so forth and so on. So we've gone through those gambits of discussions. So now we're sitting on a 2025 budget for next year based on what we looked at historically. 2024 has produced up to the date the budget was made, and of course what 2023 represented and what might be different than what's expected in 2025. And then we put it on a shelf, waiting to take it off the shelf come January 1st and dive into that new budget. But what we don't do is have plans if the budget doesn't run the way it was intended. Now we have if that's, if we don't get that group that we said we're going to get, that's a different thing. Like, group strategies have a bit of a longer play, kind of like a hurricane coming to and you see it coming, so you can plan for it. I'm talking about the fact that we treat our marketing budgets absolutely in contrast to how we treat our life. I'll take a personal case example of that. Just finished installing electric batteries as power backup to where we live, as a contingency to next year's hurricane season. If it's as bad as it was this year, it still is, because we're still until the end of the month, so who knows. But if it's as bad as it was last year for the west coast of Florida, then I have a plan that we are going to have some means of having power when there is no power available to us for air conditioning, refrigeration, ice. Ice is very important, by the way. What have you. There's a plan for that. Like, if this happens, we have this as a backup. We have certain foods that we keep, canned goods and so forth, and batteries and lights and things that when you lose the traditional way that you're doing, you have services, you have a backup to it for as long as you think you'll need it, as long as you can afford, put it into place for you. We do that with having a medical kit or anything. We have plans that if I cut my finger, I have a Band-Aid. We don't do that with our marketing. We wait for what happens, and then we react to what happens. We're reactive to anything that happens into our marketing plan. We go off and tell our vendor, this is what we want to do. This is what we have as budgets. This is what we think we're going to be spending. We confirm what services we're going to be doing. We confirm what we think we're going to be spending for it. Hopefully well calculated as to what you think you're going to get out of that spend. But even with that diligence of saying, hey, we have our cost ratios, our value ratios, we have our programs and campaigns of what we're looking for, targeted marketing and so forth. We have a plan, our marketing plan. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't go the way we want. Now, this we see repeatedly year after year with forecasts for the following year by the prognosticators that say the travel industry is going to grow by X%. And they go into the year with this probably moderately high expectation of success. And then as the year progresses into actuals, after the first quarter, there's a realignment. Well, this happened and X happened and Y happened and all this other stuff. So we're downcasting our forecast because of the now actualized things that happened in January, February, March. And we think that we are down X%. And every year for 8 years that I can think back clearly on, this has been the case. Every year, it ends up falling short of what they anticipate. Now, you may have been proactive in saying, oh, well, I have a plan for diminished returns. I'm going to shift from this channel to this channel and have that channel cover it. Even though it's more expensive, it has a higher production value compared to the other channels as options. And what do I mean by this? Well, if you have channel A and it has a cost ratio of 20%, and you have channel B and it has a cost ratio of 25% compared to channel C, which has a cost ratio of 30%, then if you have room to grow in channel B, if channel A doesn't produce as high as you want it to, which is your preferred because of the lower cost, you'll shift the funding to channel B, that even though it's more in cost, it's not as costly as channel C. That's what I mean by shifting to fill in some of the void. The problem is that not every channel is a good replacement to the previous channels or other channels. Some channels have a maximum capacity of contribution, which is your top line revenue contribution percentages that you calculate. How much of this channel really drives business for me? we see a very laissez-faire response that happens with most people. Oh, I hate OTAs. OTAs are the bane of our industry. OTAs, and as soon as something happens lower than expectation, you come hat in hand to the front door offering any inventory available to that they can sell at whatever rate that they want to sell it at, or percentage or cost or volume of inventory or whatever. Most people are incredibly hypocritical because why? They don't think of other options. They don't think that they have control or influence over other things that they could choose to do rather than just ponying out inventory to OTAs, because OTAs will continue to spend marketing dollars. Because what do? They make the first decision they're not going to spend the same dollars. We got to save money. We got to batten down the hatches. We got to keep the war chest together. We got to reduce our costs. These are the standard knee-jerk reactions to diminished revenue production. All of this is a working knowledge that you have sitting in chairs in all of your departments that you need to exercise a process of discovering what we would do if. So you run simulations. Let's look at January 2025. We have an expected revenue goal, hopefully realistic, of X. To produce X, we have the following 10 channels: meta search, paid Google, paid social, direct channel CRM, ad campaigns for traditional media, Dove media, OTT media, whatever. There's all of our contribution channels, plus our group contribution, which is already being run as a nascent of itself, walk-in traffic, all the sources of business that will generate this X figure for us in January. Well, which ones are first at the highest level of iffiness? That's a technical term. Questionableness, that are we stretching that channel too far? Are we expecting too much from that channel? Or are we leaning too heavy on that channel so that that channel waver in what we think is going to contribute? Will we have a more direct impact? Some channels are smaller in contribution, and if they don't produce at a certain level, their impact is minimal compared to channels that we rely heavily on, should they waver the same percentage. What's the plan? Now, sometimes the plan can be changing how you're using that channel. I'll take Google Ads as a great example. You have your traditional branding campaigns that are running, and you have your non-branded campaigns. That's the most simple clumping of ad campaign structures that people do, most consistent, I guess. And you have a certain percentage that's brand. Usually it's a higher contribution because it's low-hanging fruit, very affordable. People looking for you by your name find you because of the efforts that you make to be always in front of them, and the conversion is higher. That's usually how it goes, and the cost is lower because it is your name. You don't get penalized by Google or Bing to pay high amounts of money for showing up for who you are. So that is a good solid channel that may represent 60-70% of your total paid ad campaign contributions out of Google. The other is your non-branded, 30, 40, maybe even 50% of it is towards things like where your hotel is at or the value proposition of your hotel in comparison to everything else that's in your market, or the types of travel, or the targeting of types of travel to your destination. What happens if either one of those don't run the line that you think they're running for what they are producing? You may change your structure of your branding. You may determine that it's better to broaden the term of your branding in how people are searching for you. Maybe your title is a little too long, or your name is a little too long, or maybe not as easily identified, or it gets lost in branding. The real leverage point you have is the non-branding. Perhaps you're being too broad stroked and paying too much money for the incremental value of traffic that it's producing. Maybe you need to sharpen the point of the pencil and look for more targeted campaigns that are related to your non-branded focus that you can be better suited for, so you can reduce your cost. There's basically 3 levers associated with paid campaigns: volume of traffic, volume of conversions, okay? Volume of clicks, volume of conversions. Sorry, traffic, funnel, engagement, conversion. All those are smaller numbers than the previous. You can either focus on generating more volume and let the bleed factor of the fact that your conversion level is low, but you're shoveling more people in the top of the funnel, so you're still producing from it. Or you may put a sharper point to the pencil of improving your conversions to that process. So when you do your stress testing of, say, Google Ads, what happens if you diminish your traffic? What are you going to do? What's a possible strategy? Write it down, list it, Give it as an option A, option B, option C. Write about whether you think this is a good idea, the second best idea, the all hope and no despair idea, whatever. Have it so that when things do shift, as they tend to historically do, out of things that are unexpected, you have something to go to that you can look at and evaluate if it's applicable to be usable in that channel. And you can have several options to this one. If non-branded goes down, which campaign? If it's this campaign, then it might be because the destination interest is down. Maybe because there's bad weather. Maybe because there's bad press about your destination. Maybe the demographics that usually come that time of year for you are shifting to another interest. They've chosen something else. Maybe your price point out of it. Maybe your demographics are changing. All of these things, you should have some sort of queryable answer to what you're going to do for them, should that be the case within the channel. But then even with all those things, if it's just not viable to a threshold that now compares it to another channel, let's say paid social, picking out of a hat really, but it's not too far distant. But maybe paid social, which is more expensive compared to normal Google paid. But now, given that all these things in Google paid are raising the cost of it and it's not producing, now all of a sudden the cost factor of paid social might be a better alternative to maybe take the funding out of Google paid and redirect it to Google to paid social. Maybe now it's reached that threshold of commonality with cost, and maybe even inferior, okay, where it's costing more than paid social, that it's a good move. But paid social historically may have only been 5% of your total direct marketing strategy. And even on a good day, it would never exceed 8% of your total strategy. So even though you could pump more money into your second channel, say paid social in this example, it doesn't mean that it's going to compensate completely for the loss of the production of Google paid, which might be 40% of your total direct channel. It just can't carry that load. It's like you're swapping on NASCAR for Pinto, if you old enough to remember Pintos. Let's do a Prius. Anyways, the idea is that it's not equitable swap. What you're doing is you're just staving off some of the bleed. You're trying to compensate as much as the other channels convert. And you look at all channels like that. You can see whether or not you can amplify other channels, regardless of their cost factors, as to being maybe to compensate for the total loss of one other channel. But this whole modeling of doing these things is where you look at what would you do if, and you have this as a contingency relationship portfolio. This is, if this channel is acting differently, here's some other things we've considered about refining it, depending upon what time of year. Obviously, what you would do to fix a Google paid campaign in January is not the same that you do to fix a Google paid campaign in July. They're just not similar enough. It's just a channel of commonality. It's not the method, the demographics, the targeting are all different and variable according to the business that you get for that particular time period. So just don't homogenize it and say, if Google does this, we're going to do this, no matter when that happens, because that's an unfair statement. That doesn't really help. It's better than not having it, but it's not worth what you're doing it for. The idea is you're creating stress test environments. That's where the simulations modeling and stress test combination comes together. You're basically saying, here's our January, and making January as the example of the day. If these things vary, what do we think we would do in compensation of those? What happens if we do turn it down? Then let's look at our historical data from January, which is really a very cool thing when you think about it, that we have now with GA4, the ability to go back onto data that we weren't tracking directly, specifically, like I want to follow this conversion funnel or these goals or insights or whatever, to now being able to go back because it tracks everything and say, well, I want to look at this data differently now. Let me look at last January and let me see what I wasn't looking for. Wonder if I took Google down, what else is there that I didn't see last year that would be worth consideration this year if the same scenario of demographics or same scenario of traffic was coming in. And again, keeping in mind, we have three impacting variables. We have total traffic we generate, that traffic going to where we want it to go to, and that traffic itself converting. Those three places are where we have levers and buttons to pull and push. What we do to drive the traffic, what do we do to convert the traffic, to click on it, and what we do to go over and convert that traffic that does click. That process has to be thought of in context for what if. And that what if should be based on what's the most volatile or what is the most concerning. I'm not 100% confident that that channel is going to do what we think it's going to do. And then the only people that know that are the people that built the budget knowing that they pushed the number too far, or the people that went over and had the idea that they were relying upon a channel that had extraordinary circumstances last time, and maybe not repeatable or repeatable same circumstances this time. I'm not saying that you had the Super Bowl and that you're not going to have the Super Bowl next year. I'm going to say that we got picked for the basketball tournament and had a lot of groups in that month. It's not repeatable this year. So we're going for transient, which will cost us X amount of dollars, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's a variable that you're not totally certain on. Can you truly replace all of that group demand with the transient demand as intended? Did you displace that much transient demand last time to take the group demand? And so maybe that's a soft spot of, well, we're hoping it works that way. But if it doesn't, we should think like this. That's what I mean by stress testing. That's what I mean by simulation. That's what I mean by modeling. You're looking for the opportunity to consider wonder if or what abouts in that process. So how do you kind of approach all this? One thing I already told you about is going into GA and analytics and looking back at previous months and take January 2024 and mentally change it to January 2025 and look at your channel contribution top line. Most people, as I've told you before, do not know their percentage contributions on top. I think I made another desk pounding statement last week that I said that nobody ever, when I ask them, when I know what the data says it is, knows what their OTA contribution is. They always, always, always underestimate their contribution from the OTA. It's always more than they think it is because they don't look at it. I'm not saying I think you should, but I'm not saying you sit on it every day like an egg, but I think you should be persistently aware of your channel contributions, at least on a month-to-month, if not quarter-to-quarter way, because you need to know where your business is coming from. You're the fuel to the engine of everything that runs operationally, cost-wise, everything. You should know where that's coming from and in what volumes. But if you were to go back to January 2024, you don't have to apply 2025 numbers on it. Just look at it as if what happens if. Take the data because it's real data and go say, well, what happens if we lost 20% of our Google Ads contribution? Just take it off dollar-wise. Let's go into the Google ad campaigns. What would happen? Let's look at the campaign sets that are producing. And granted, we took 20% of revenue off, but the proportion of what contributions comes from where tends to stay about the same. If it doesn't, it's a real easy fix because if one of your campaigns just fell off the map, then that was wrong. Let's have something to fix that and replace it with. It's an easy fix. But if it just diminishes in value, it's still producing, proportionally still producing the same as the other proportions within the Google Ads. It's a little harder fix to find. Now you're going in and saying, well, what's changed about what we have these targeted for? What's changed about this campaign in the sense of, well, are we still well identified? Did we lose our GMB preference? Did we get bad reviews? What has changed our production of, is it traffic? Is it people converting from the traffic? Or is it people converting from the traffic from the click? Where is that loss? Where would that loss potentially be at? And you begin to deconstruct your campaigns for the purpose of what you built them for. And you see whether or not they're still viable. This exercise alone makes you acutely aware because most likely you reduplicated your efforts for January 25, similar to what you had already running in January 24. And given the reality of most people's relationship with vendors and or their efforts in doing these things, that they rely upon people other than themselves, they didn't get into the granularity of any campaign variances they're going to do. They're literally going to run the campaign until the campaign doesn't run well. And then they're going to try to reactively figure out what should we do about it. And that lag time, as we've talked about in the past few weeks, creates a dip in your total production. That dip in the production impacts not just the short-term, but the long-term production, which creates it very stressful when revenues begin to dip persistently because you're not paying attention until it shows a negative impact, at which point you're trying to fix a problem that's already cost you. You're not proactively looking at variations that are telling you these things need to be looked at and changed before they get to a point that they're creating harm and good. We talked about that. And that is where analytics and data does come in. We've talked extensively about looking at predictive modeling that says, here's my campaigns running. other than the green arrow up and the positive number, the actual impact of these campaigns is beginning to diminish in their quality of traffic, quality of clicks, quality of conversions. It's a slow bleed, which means that we're transitioning out of its value. If it's a hard bleed, then something's wrong. This way of looking at the health of your campaigns can make it so that you know what to put into the slot or fix the current operations to prop it back up or replace it with more productive. That way you never get that dip that creates the problems that you are forever chasing afterwards. Kind of like in sports, you get behind early in the game and your whole game is based on trying to get ahead again, rather than getting ahead and staying ahead. Different strategies. That's one way of looking at your ability to predict and create simulations to this. The other is to ask questions about, is our strategies still valid for whom we're pursuing during this time? A lot of time, the budget process is about discovering numbers, not necessarily strategy. Marketing should come back with you with what they think. What they're going to do is take what they've been doing and put that as a baseline. So what we've done. So let's say that's going to keep doing that. What are we going to do differently or add to it? Is it more money we need? More campaign structures? What are we doing? That's usually what we start from is let's take the old one, make it a baseline, and then see what we have to modify. Nobody ever looks at it saying, let's look at this whole thing again, make sure everything that we're running is still good. Nobody does that until it breaks. Then when it breaks, then they can say, what do we need to do to fix it? And in that process of politics and communications and replacements and initiations and reporting to whether the replacement is sufficient and so forth, you get this 2, 3, 4 week dip in production of this channel at a time when you could have much more quickly replaced the issue or fixed the issue predictively with the data, or better yet, had a simulation that if this were to happen, we already have options that we think would be considered to immediately change what's happening so we lose as little revenue opportunity as possible. This is the modality of what a marketing person should be doing persistently in their communications with revenue management, operations, and ownership. So when do you do this? Before you need it. You do these simulations, you do these testings. Well, hey, Lauren, it's Thanksgiving next week. And then we're going to get into Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, and poof, we're out the other end of the cannon. Come January, political climate's changing. It's a new year, new budgets, and a lot of, we get a gratis because even if January goes in the crapper right off the bat, first day, first week, whatever, you're going to sit on your hands to see if that's a temporary thing, a misjudgment. Maybe we'll just, things are a little different here, so we're going to give it a little time, see what happens. That time is killer. One of the things that most people don't know is that you can create experiments in things like Google Ads that you can run. Wonder if. Let's just run wonder if. It's kind of like if you were wanting to do the stock market. Like back when, no money, and you say, well, what if I had $1,000 and I went to the stock market and I invested, and then you would keep track of it. I mean, remember in school, economics classes in college or whatever, you did this just to hypothetically, how well would you do? You can do the same thing with your Google ad campaigns. So you can create experiments. Like, okay, let's say we did this targeting. Let's say we were going to do this kind of spend. Okay. Not that, anyways, going into it, you'll see what it does. But anyways, what it can do is it can tell you how well you might have done or how poorly you might have done or what did or didn't work, more importantly. It's not whether or not you're a complete success or complete failure to your experiment. It's whether or not you're on the right track. Was there enough that you learned from it that you modified what you're currently doing with it? Did you learn enough from it that you might change completely what you're doing with it, with what your current marketing strategies is? Did you learn enough from it that maybe you're finding another avenue that is now in consideration of augmenting what you're doing with it? The idea is it gives you a test bed that rather than going from hypothetical, it gives you a working model that you can have a much more concrete perspective as to whether or not that would be a good venue to go to. You can do this with others. You can create and emulate some things. I've often told you there's some great tools out there. We cover them in the podcast quite regularly. And the one I keep referring to persistently is Geru, Geru, where you can go in and create the modeling of taking the data and putting it into a construct model and assigning values and conversions and everything else like this in a workflow. And it'll actually show you the potential revenue opportunity or cost or failure or success of what you put into it. long before you ever spend a dollar of money. You don't have to spend money to find out whether you're right or wrong. And agencies that do that are doing that to their self-preservation, because they might be being paid a commission, or being paid by the time it takes for them to build the campaigns, whatever it is. And their excuse to hide behind it is because you asked them to. And it wasn't successful. Well, you asked us to do that. We did that. And well, why didn't you tell me it wasn't going to be successful? Well, we didn't know. Well, why wouldn't you know? You're the professional. You're supposed to know when I tell you to go over and chase people that carry poodles for travel, that there's not a lot of people with poodles, whatever. The vendor should be professional in their insights to tell them, I know you're really excited about this idea, but the pigs don't fly. And that is not going to produce well. It's too niche, to a specific, too variable, too volatile, whatever it would be, but be candid. And if the client still wants to run it, sure, run it for them, because it is, at the end of the day, their decision. But don't do it in that, I told you so, but in a sense of, okay, so now you understand when we're telling you these things, it's because it's based on traffic, clicks of that traffic, conversion from that traffic. And you didn't have enough of this, or enough of this, or enough of this to make this a viable option for you. By the same token, I have been very pleasantly surprised by weird, out of left field ideas that have presented to me. I'm sitting there going, I don't know about that, but you know what? Let's see what we can do with it. We'll put together in a simulation, see what it is, and be like, son of a gun, there's enough there. Or, wow, that's a brilliant idea. These things come from the dialogue of wondering the what ifs, the how abouts, and what should we do abouts. And that's what you need to do with your current budget before you need to rely on it. Because right now, until the end of this year, everything in 2025 is in the future. You can play with all of those numbers so that even though your budget is finalized, you can look at January and going, okay, looking at January 24 and just stress testing it in comparison, if we lost certain segments, contribution or cost variables or traffic variables, what have you, this is going to put us in jeopardy pretty fast, pretty hard. So that first few days where we don't see the performance is going to be scary, because it's going to justify that we probably are off the mark. So let's have this in the queue. Okay, let's have it up on bad. So that should this falter, this gets put in right away, so that we don't get that hiccup to start the year. That's a great way of doing it. The other is to look at the chance to try things in a way that you get an immediate feedback. If you're, if you're talking for a whole new venue of targeting, and you've tried the experimental stuff maybe, and you looked at it and it's inconclusive. It shows that there's stuff there, but it's really hard to justify it based on what you're seeing, because you're running an experiment in November about business that's in January. Remember, there's a reality to this. Okay. It's not like you can create a simulation and tell Google, I want this to be running at these time dates. It's running at the time that you're running the experiment. So if you're talking about wonderful winter events and you're experimenting it in summer, you might not get the same traffic results. That's where the experiments begin to not have their full value to this, is because they're running in real time. But having some semblance that there's something there, but being able to run it at a time that it would be actually applicable, changes the perspective of whether or not that experiment can be put into actual ad campaign structure sooner rather than later, because the one that's currently running is faltering at a threshold, KPI level, that is no longer acceptable. And that's what you have to do with any of these things, is create what is and is not an acceptable performance metric. You have to know where your fences are. If you're just looking at what variations are there, well, the Titanic missed the iceberg by inches. Still created a tragedy, but unfortunately, it didn't run straight into it, just scraped it. The idea that you don't have a parameter that you need to be operating in, what is considered successful and what is considered unsuccessful. Anything beyond successful, it's great. This is wonderful. How much money can we spend on this when it's making that kind of return? Metasearch is a great example of that. But if on the bottom end of it, if it gets to that point of this is costing us more than it's worth doing, the only last thing that can still save the campaign is absence creates conversion to another channel that might be painful to you, that it's, even if it's more expensive to continue running in comparison to its true direct channel value, the alternative of what replaces it, like an OTA or a third party of any sort other than them, is that the cost factor goes up so much more, because now we're getting the business from them. Just think of the SERP pages If you're not there in the ad paid section, somebody is. There's never a blank spot. Let's put it that way. So if you're not there, somebody else is. And you have to weigh that sometimes. That might be the only thing that keeps a campaign running is we have to be there so that somebody else isn't. And a lot of times it can be your competitors. If you're not producing strong brand awareness of yourself, others can bleed traffic from you, portal sites, CVBs, TDCs, so forth, that they turn into a higher value source that you may have a whole cost value problem with that costs you a lot to get business from them because you didn't pay for your own presence, for your own name, and they're doing it for you and you're paying them for that. So that happens. And that's unfortunately what happens a lot with OTAs more so than anything else. So I think knowing that we've talked about this conversation before and knowing that we've talked about the nuances as to pieces of it these past few weeks as to what to build and what to use in this process, that simulations, modeling, and stress tests, preparations before the need is a key component now while we still have time this year to look at at least your first quarter functions, January, February, March, as to what you're doing, how you're doing it, how good is it. Work at it from there. And so you have a good plan B already in your pocket. Should anything begin to not look what you anticipated for start January 1st. Doesn't mean you get hyper, like January 1st, the numbers doesn't match exactly what you want. Oh my God, we're going to change the world. No. But I'm also not saying wait too long to make that choice either. Look at the variations as to whether they are for your productions as to being fast and painful or slow and progressive, because fast and painful means it's the wrong direction. Slow and painful means its value is diminished. Just things to consider. As always, thank you for everyone that watches this on our TV channel, broadcasting in 209 countries. And I didn't realize how big of a number that was until I started counting how many countries in the world, obviously, but also just the dimensions of having it go out to that many countries is humbling. Our live show simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch but we appreciate all of our associations that broadcast us on their pages, and also our corporate relationships of people that find value in our content and want to share it to those that follow their companies. Also to their YouTube channels, same thing. Thank you so much for sharing it everywhere. We do recast this show at 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends, 11:30 a.m. Wednesdays, London time for our EU and Mideast friends. So there's more reasonable time. That being said, we still get an amazing, I'm looking over here because my computer monitor's there and I'm watching the other display platforms we're running. It always is amazing for people, for me to see people in such amazing time zones watching us live. We do have our audio podcast after this, which we go dive into some shows. We're going to be doing, actually talking a little bit more about Gear Root today. And our tools, we get very concise about it, a little bit shorter and just audio only. We broadcast that on 39 podcast platforms. No, 36 podcast platforms to 39 countries. That's what it is. We also have our hospitality radio station. You can catch it online at hospitalityradio.com. We have a variety of podcasts, all related to industry conversations on that channel. You can catch us on radio broadcasts, digital radio broadcasts around the world for that. We also have our TV channels I mentioned, which is on Google TV, Amazon TV, Apple TV, Roku TV. Wow, a lot of them. LG, Samsung, any smart TV, just look for the hospitality channel. The show is always on the free side of that. There's a pay gateway for more content on the other side, which is always fun. We do have our Hospitality Marketing Club. If you want to talk to peer level people doing hospitality marketing, go to hospitalitymarketing.club. Put in your email address, send you a quiz, validate that you are a hospitality marketing person now. Not that you're trying to learn hospitality marketing. You get better at hospitality marketing. It's a peer group. There's plenty of people trying to teach you basic hospitality stuff. So go for that. We go for the journeyman and up professional caliber people. We have some amazing, fascinating conversations on that channel. Should you like to join us? I'm trying to think of anything else for it. Our Forever Live Love Lucy rerun, hospitalitychannel.tv. All of the TV shows, all of our podcasts are there either by broadcast date, guest host, or topic. You can search for all of them. We've been doing the live show, this one, for 10 years every week. Hence the 209 countries, right? And our podcast for 17 years. So soon be 18, 2025. Yeah, about 18 years, yeah. Whew. Anyways, so you'll be able to catch us wherever you can for any of the information that you find valuable. As always, I respond to everybody that has a comment, query, question, anything. Go to Lauren at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. Send me an email there. Or Lauren at hospitalitypodcast.com. You can go and catch an audio. You can send me an audio message if you like at hdm.news/talkback. I always leave a question of the week out there if you want to comment on it, or if you have any information that you would like to share. You give me the credentials of either acknowledging who you are or just referring to content you asked a question about. So I think I hit all the bases for that. So yes, we are, as always, regardless of holidays and when they land, we will have our show next week, which will be on Friday, which means I'll probably be like this for what I have planned for cooking for Thanksgiving, because I love to cook, for those that know me. So we should have a lot of fun next week as well. So if you have time, you want to get away from the family, or you just want to sit and veg out on me talking about something profoundly important, you can catch us next week at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, US, on the channel that you discovered us on. So until then, my name is Loren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week.